Now, I won't lie to you, friends, we've all fought so many bosses in video games over the years that it's kind of tough for any of them to make an impression that burrows deep under the skin. But this gallery of creepers and critters that we're talking about today, well, they certainly got the job done, and then some, as we're going to be talking about some video game bosses that are genuinely creepy. In fact, it's so spooky that my Scooby-Doo Zoinksometer is off the charts, so I've had to rope in the help of Dark Reaper 1982's comment from last week's episode, which will become a full-fledged entry in this list. And if you want to be a part of next week's video, then have a think on what you would pick as the best video game controller, and say it with me, kids, of all time! Yeah, before we get our mitts on some great controllers, let's throw some hands with these scary bosses. As I'm Jules, this is FGS, and these are 10 video game bosses that are genuinely creepy. Number 10, Psycho Mantis, Metal Gear Solid. In the original Metal Gear Solid, the Psycho Mantis boss fight was the game's, well, just got real moment, where Hideo Kojima enthusiastically headbutted the fourth wall in the most unnerving fashion possible. Because having to face off against a PVC-clad gas mask-wearing psychic who can predict your every movement wasn't creepy enough, Mantis had a few other eerie tricks up his sleeve, even though he didn't have sleeves. For one, he could read your PlayStation memory card and would comment on any save files that you had for other Konami games, as well as pretending to turn your TV off and forcing you to switch controller ports to avoid him reading your mind. Couple all of this with the fight's creepily ornate setting, shudder-inducing music, and the deeply uncomfortable sequence where Mantis takes control of Merle like a puppet, and this is the franchise at its most brilliantly ominous. And as the most ambitious boss fight in the original game, it undeniably paved the way for the more boundary-pushing bosses that Kojima cooked up in subsequent Metal Gear Solid games. Number 9, The Teacher, Little Nightmares 2. Little Nightmares' bosses are a skin-crawling menagerie of sublime abominations, enough so that picking one of them to rule is not at all easy. But it's gotta really be The Teacher from Little Nightmares 2, the boss of the sequel's school chapter, a definitely not Freudian rendition of the sort of educator that we all feared as children. At first, the teacher's creepiness seems to be limited to her unsettlingly blank, uncanny facial expressions, but that all changes once you cause some accidental commotion whilst traipsing through the school. At this point, she quite literally cranes her neck across entire rooms in search of you, the sound alone of which is enough to induce nausea in even the hardiest of players. Add to this her off-puttingly stilted, jittery movements, and this is peak video game villain design, primed to leave you paradoxically repulsed by and utterly in awe of her. And to rub salt in the wound, you don't even get to kill her. Number 8, Omega Flowy, Undertale. Undertale is proof perfect that you don't need a huge production budget to deliver a memorably disturbing villain design that fans will be still talking about over a decade later. After all, the entire appeal, and we use that term loosely here, of the Neutral Roots final boss Omega Flowy lies in how intentionally, garishly malformed he is. A veritable car crash of man, machine, and flower parts, Omega Flowy's appearance is so distractingly macabre that it's actually tough to focus on the mechanics of the boss fight itself. It's nothing if not a far cry from his genuinely adorable presence at the start of the game as a golden flower with a beaming smile. In his final form, he is legitimately a stomach-churning collision of living things and technology that is wholly at odds with Undertale's prevailing art style that is otherwise seen. Even looking at a screen grab of the guy is enough to induce goosebumps and obliterate your appetite. Number 7, The Vortex Queen, Echo the Dolphin. Echo the Dolphin. I'm sure that we all have fond memories of this game growing up. Well, in actuality, we probably had fond memories of the opening section of this game as kids because it wasn't actually clear at all what the hell you're meant to be doing, nor how to actually do it. Yet those who actually progressed out into the wider world of Echo may well wish that they stayed put in the shallows, just frolicking and chasing fish through the waters, because beyond this point, well, I've got one word for you, friends. Aliens. Oh, actually, wait, hold on. I found some more words here. Super scary aliens. And that is most definitely true of their leader, the Vortex Queen, which is Dark Reaper 1982's pick for this list, and I both thank them for this excellent submission, but also hate how I now have to relive this moment. When you're dropped into the battle arena in the final confrontation, you might instinctively dash to the side of the stage because the Vortex Queen, well, she's utterly horrifying and huge to boot, with her massive face dominating the screen. This monstrous visage floating in endless black gives you but a glimpse of her true size, and with that comes the horror of the unknown, which again, you're dealing with while actively trying to battle her. No bloody thank you. Yet, unfortunately, you'll have to dig deep and face your fears if you're to ever save Echo's friends and the world at large. good luck. Number 6. Giant Atlantean. Tomb Raider. Almost 30 years removed on from the original Tomb Raider, it's easy to forget just how unhinged this game gets later on. Case in point, its penultimate boss fight sees Lara Croft take on the massive, skinless, legless torso of a mutant Atlantean. Whatever the hell that is. Nicknamed the Abortion by developers Core Design for good reason, the giant Atlantean marks a sudden divergence into hideous body horror that will leave you reaching for the nearest bottle of eye bleach in record time. Given that Tomb Raider was basically marketed as the video game equivalent of Indiana Jones, for it to become a David Cronenberg movie in the final stretch was, well, definitely a choice, alright. Unsurprisingly, the recent reboot trilogy largely opted to leave the eldritch supernatural monsters on the bench, lest it alienate the mainstream that are just looking for a slickly inoffensive AAA action-adventure romp. But for those who played the original, we remember. Number 5. The Rat King. The Last of Us Part 2. Impressively outdoing the biblically creepy cannibal David from the original Last of Us, we have the sequel's nauseatingly grotesque monstrosity known as the Rat King. Encountered by Abby in the hospital near the end of the game, the Rat King is a revolting superorganism, a fleshy blob comprised of numerous clickers and a bloater that are fused into one disgusting pulsating mass. It's a shocking sight to behold, and beyond that, the Rat King is by far the strongest infected entity encountered in either game, ensuring it will make short work of players who are not on their guard. The phrase "kill it with fire" has never actually felt more apt, because that's precisely what you need to do to keep the Rat King at bay, and once it's down, you'll probably need to pause the game and go for a walk around the block, have a smoke, or just lie down for a bit. Just make sure it's one of the above, because that was harrowing. Number 4. Dead Hand. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. While most of the games on this list are at least somewhat adult-themed, who expected to be ambushed by a sleep paralysis demon in the middle of Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time? Dead Hand is a mini-boss which appears in both the bottom of the well and the Shadow Temple, a thoroughly cursed blob-like entity with a dislocated jaw that's covered in bloodstains. Oh, and it can grab you with its numerous disembodied hands that stick out of the ground for good measure. Worst of all, the easiest way to defeat the Dead Hand the first time around is by letting yourself get grabbed by its gross hands, waiting for the main blob to emerge, and then breaking free to attack. Ew. Nintendo hasn't ever elaborated upon the existence or purpose of the Dead Hand beyond just being an almost inappropriately horrible inclusion in a game played by millions of children. Cheers for that. Number 3. Gigantus. Earthbound. Earthbound's sprightly, colourful visuals belie the fact that the final boss, the cosmic destroyer Gigantus, left an entire generation of young players paralysed with fear. Gigantus' final form, or at least how his incomprehensible form is presented to us, is that of a twisted, screaming face bathed in red, a visage which only grows more distorted and impenetrable as the fight goes on. The off-puttingly kaleidoscopic visuals are made even more uncomfortable by an oppressively droning score, enough that if a parent walked in on you playing this, they'd definitely be second-guessing their purchasing decision, and probably calling a bloody exorcist. It's all apt for a villain who wants to plunge reality into infinite darkness, of course, but still, it's wildly out of step with the game's tone and aesthetic otherwise. Perhaps the only solace is that a long-held fan theory that Gigantus is actually a fetus was firmly debunked by its creator, because he's horrifying enough to behold as it is, and we do not need to have any more scary babies, especially as we go into number 2, the baby from Resident Evil Village. When you're 8 mainline games into a survival horror franchise, it can be tough to come up with new bosses which genuinely strike fear into the hearts of players. Or so we thought, because Capcom went straight for the jugular in Resident Evil Village when they had us all face off against a giant mutant baby. After reaching House Beneviento and descending into the basement, you will hear the wailing cries of a baby, which soon enough makes its presence felt. With an appearance that you could best describe as globular, this revolting aberration seeps through the house towards you, making disconcertingly childlike chuckles, all while you've got no weapons to defend yourself with. Oh, and it starts crying when it loses sight of you, which might invoke a little sympathy were it not the single ugliest creation in the entire Resident Evil franchise. And that is one hell of a high bar. Though the baby could have easily turned into something that's just more silly than scary, the utterly gross character design combined with the toe-curlingly upsetting soundwork ensure that this monster is as creepy as video game villains get. Well, almost, because number 1, it could only be Pyramid Head. from Silent Hill 2. And finally, the veritable GOAT of creepy video game villains. Yes, it's gotta be everyone's favorite walking cheese grater, Silent Hill 2's Pyramid Head. Who else on this list is introduced to players by doing something ambiguous and yet incredibly disturbing to a pair of mannequins? It sets the tone for all of Pyramid Head's appearances throughout the game, where he serves as a stalker who induces palm-sweated dread every time he materializes. But the game dares to go deeper still, with Pyramid Head serving as a manifestation of protagonist James's guilt over killing his terminally ill wife Mary, and moreover, his desire to be punished for this act. This ensures that Pyramid Head isn't merely a brilliantly designed vessel for shallow nightmare fuel, he's also packed to the gills with psychological context. Just tried to forget about that time that Konami put him into an international track and field game though, yeah? Yeah, that happened. Enjoy. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 video game bosses that are genuinely creepy. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. And if you want to be part of next week's video, then have a think about what you would pick as the best video game controller, and say it with me, kids, of all time. Hope you have a great week, and I look forward to speaking to you all soon. Big love to you all, and make sure you're smashing your life goals, my friend, because you are a massive ledge. As always, I've been Jules, you have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.